Imagine building a multi-million-dollar, heavily fortified bank vault. Biometric scanners, seismic sensors, all of that.
Right, the works.
Yeah, the works. But then, just to make things easier during construction, you leave the contractor's side door propped open with a brick, and you just forget about it.
Which sounds like a cartoonish oversight, honestly.
It does, but today we're going to look at how that exact scenario just played out with the water supply for millions of people. So welcome to Calm Coding, your weekly cybersecurity discussion covering the latest news and stories in the digital threat landscape.
And our mission today is really mapping the architecture of modern vulnerability. We're looking at how exposure scales.
Right, from a massive 24 billion record data leak to seasonal phishing campaigns, then down into hardware vulnerabilities sitting literally inside your ear canal, and finally out to the physical reality of our city infrastructure.
It's just a spectrum of fragility, really, because whether you are actively booking a summer vacation or passively listening to us on your commute or just relying on your local municipality to keep the water flowing, these sources show that modern security is incredibly complex.
Yeah, it's less about building an impenetrable wall and more about understanding the web of dependencies we interact with every single day.
Exactly.
So let's start by looking at the sheer volume of ammunition threat actors are currently working with. Security researchers at Cyber News recently found an 8-terabyte Elasticsearch database.
Just sitting completely unprotected on the open internet.
Exactly. Unprotected. And it contains a staggering 24 billion records.
Which is massive. I mean, we're talking usernames, passwords, login URLs.
Yeah, and the researchers noted this is an active compilation from 36 different sources. So massive amounts of infostealer logs, previous data breaches.
And notably, about 260 million records from Russian and English Telegram channels tied to DarkSide.
Right, the ransomware group behind the Colonial Pipeline attack. Now, massive data dumps are practically a weekly occurrence. But since this is a compilation of old breaches, I want to understand the mechanics here.
Sure.
Why does aggregating 36 different historical leaks into one database make this, exponentially more dangerous than if they had just stayed separate?
Well, the danger lies in the architecture of Elasticsearch itself. I mean, this isn't just a raw, unstructured text file dumped on a server.
Right, it's not just a notepad document.
Exactly. Elasticsearch is an incredibly powerful, highly scalable search and analytics engine. It takes massive amounts of unstructured data, indexes it, and makes it searchable in milliseconds.
Oh, wow. So when a threat actor aggregates 24 billion records into an environment like that, they aren't just storing old puzzle pieces.
No, they're building a highly indexed, cross-referenced behavioral dictionary of human security habits.
So it allows them to query across different contexts instantly.
Precisely. Let's say a threat actor wants to compromise a corporate network. If they just have an isolated data dump from, say, a random gaming forum breached in 2015, they have one username and one password.
Which might be completely outdated by now.
Right, but with an indexed database of 24 billion records, combining infostealer logs and Telegram leaks, they can run an automated query to see every password you've ever used.
Across every platform over the last decade.
Exactly. They can map the specific permutations you use when a site requires a special character versus when it doesn't.
It's basically weaponized pattern recognition.
It really is. And infostealer logs are particularly devastating here because they capture session cookies, browser fingerprints, and exact login URLs, not just credentials.
So attackers can optimize their credential stuffing attacks without guessing blindly. The algorithms can predict your current corporate password based on your terrible gaming passwords from 10 years ago.
Yeah, and because this database is actively updated by an unknown owner, it functions as a live, centralized intelligence hub for cybercrime.
Which perfectly illustrates how these macro-level leaks fuel highly targeted campaigns. All those indexed credentials don't just sit idle.
Right, they get deployed when human behavior is most predictable.
And researchers are seeing a massive spike in activity right now, targeting a very specific human vulnerability, which is the rush to book summer holidays.
Threat actors are highly attuned to seasonal psychological shifts.
And the data from Checkpoint Research absolutely confirms that. In May 2026, the hospitality, travel, and recreation sector faced an average of 2,291 weekly cyber attacks per organization.
That is a 24% month-over-month increase.
Yeah, and more than double the volume from May 2023, a 122% jump over the last 3 years. But the telling statistic is that the overall cross-industry rise in cyber attacks was only 2%.
So this is a highly concentrated, deliberate siege on the travel industry.
Exactly. They also found over 47,000 new travel-related domains registered in just that 1 month.
With 112 already flagged as malicious.
Right. Attackers are spoofing platforms like Booking, Airbnb, and Skyscanner. But I have a hard time wrapping my head around the success rate here. With all the corporate training and public awareness around phishing, how are these campaigns still yielding a return on investment?
Well, it is less about users abandoning hygiene and more about the attackers neutralizing the indicators we've trained users to look for.
Are you saying the fake sites are just that good?
Yeah, think about how these domains are generated. Attackers are utilizing automated frameworks to scrape the HTML, the cascading style sheets, and the high-resolution assets directly from the legitimate sites.
So they deploy pickle-perfect clones.
Exactly. But the real linchpin of these modern spoofing campaigns is the abuse of SSL certificates.
Oh, you mean the padlock icon in the browser bar?
Right. That little padlock has been the cornerstone of user security training for over a decade. Users are taught that if the padlock is there, the site is safe.
But technically, all an SSL certificate does is encrypt the transit layer between the user's browser and the server, right?
Exactly. It verifies that the connection is secure. It does not verify the moral character of the server's owner.
Ah, I see.
And because certificate authorities now offer automated free SSL certificates to encourage an encrypted web, attackers can spin up a domain that is one character off from Airbnb.
And automatically provision a valid certificate in seconds.
Yes, and present a site that passes every superficial visual check a user is trained to perform.
So we've essentially automated the process of giving attackers an air of legitimacy.
Pretty much.
When you combine a visually flawless interface, an encrypted connection, and a massive countdown timer screaming that you only have 3 minutes to secure a villa, I mean, the cognitive load is just too high for the average person to spot that the domain has a lowercase l instead of a capital line.
And that psychological pressure is the crucial component. Travel booking is inherently stressful. You have dates to coordinate, budgets to manage, fear of missing out on a deal. Attackers exploit that cognitive fatigue.
Right. But, even if you never click a fake link or fall for a travel scam, your active choices aren't the only way you can be compromised.
Unfortunately, no.
Sometimes your hardware is betraying you just by existing in a public space. So let's move from active human mistakes to passive hardware vulnerabilities.
The zero-click proximity-based threat.
Yeah. Apple recently patched a high-severity flaw, an 8.8 out of 10, in its Beats Studio Buds, discovered by ERNW researchers Dennis Hines and Frieder Steinmetz.
Yes, CVE 2025-2701. It stems from a missing authentication weakness in the Bluetooth radio.
Basically, an attacker within Bluetooth range could eavesdrop on conversations through the microphone of an unpaired device that is simply seeking pair requests. I want to unpack the actual mechanics of this because it sounds like magic.
It really does.
How does an attacker read data from a device they aren't even paired with?
So to understand this, we have to look at how the Bluetooth Basic Rate Enhanced Data Rate, or BREDR, handles connection requests. When your earbuds are turned on but not actively connected to your phone, they are broadcasting their presence.
Right, they're waiting for a handshake.
Exactly. The vulnerability here is a failure in the state machine of the Bluetooth chip during that initial unauthenticated phase. The researchers found that they could send specific malformed packets to the earbuds during this pre-pairing state.
Okay, and what happens then?
Well, because the device failed to properly authenticate the origin of these requests before processing them in its memory, the attackers could execute out-of-bounds reads and writes directly to the device's RAM.
Wow. It's like a bouncer at an exclusive club, letting someone wander through the VIP room and listen to conversations, just because they're standing in line outside asking to come in.
That is a brilliant mechanical analogy. The bouncer, or the authentication protocol, is processing requests it shouldn't even acknowledge yet.
That is wild.
And by overwriting specific segments of the heap memory, the researchers demonstrated they could extract call histories, pull stored contacts, and silently activate the microphone.
Just from being nearby.
Yes. Furthermore, they proved this attack could be chained with two other vulnerabilities, CVE 2025-2700 and 2702, which exploit the Bluetooth hands-free profile. By chaining these, they could potentially issue commands through the earbuds directly to the paired mobile phone.
Now, Apple has already addressed this in the Beats firmware update 1B211, which automatically installs when the buds connect to an Apple device.
Right, thankfully.
But Looking at the threat model here, you have to be within a 30-foot physical radius. You have to understand how to exploit heap memory via malformed Bluetooth packets. Realistically, is this an architecture flaw the average commuter needs to lose sleep over?
Or is it strictly a highly targeted nation-state surveillance technique?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in terms of immediate danger to the average person, the risk is incredibly low. A financially motivated cybercriminal is always going to choose the path of least resistance.
Because sending 10,000 automated holiday phishing emails is cheap and scales infinitely.
Right. Sitting on a subway with a specialized directional antenna trying to extract a single user's call history is expensive and doesn't scale at all. However, from a structural perspective, this is a profound issue.
Because the vulnerability is baked into ubiquitous consumer hardware.
Yes. If you are an investigative journalist, an executive negotiating an acquisition, or a political dissident, your threat model changes entirely. For high-value targets, state-sponsored actors will absolutely invest the resources to exploit proximity vulnerabilities.
And the terrifying aspect of this flaw is that the attacker doesn't need to infiltrate a secure facility to plant a listening device.
No, the target brings the listening device into the room for them, and it is actively broadcasting its willingness to connect to anyone in range. It highlights a fundamental tension in consumer tech.
We demand seamless, instant connectivity.
But the protocols required to deliver that seamlessness often necessitate dropping our defensive posture.
And that seamless connectivity doesn't just plague consumer electronics. It scales all the way up to critical infrastructure. Which brings us to the California Water Service, or Cal Water, breach.
This is where the digital architecture bleeds directly into physical reality.
The jump from a localized Bluetooth exploit to industrial control systems. An Iranian-linked threat group known as Handala breached Cal Water, dumping 5 gigabytes of data.
We are talking customer billing databases, names, addresses, and phone numbers.
Right. But the entry point is the real story here. The attackers didn't burn a sophisticated zero-day vulnerability.
No, they didn't ask you.
They found an internal RTK-based deployment, which is an open-source GPS base station tool used by field crews for surveying and maintaining infrastructure. This tool was left running continuously for 783 hours.
Exposed directly to the open internet via standard HTTP port 10,000.
Now, because of this exposure, administrative credentials for the platform were leaked in plaintext.
Port 10,000 is classically associated with webmin, a web-based system administration interface for Unix.
Exactly. So I want to understand the lateral movement here. How does a seemingly innocuous GPS tracking tool used by a guy in the utility truck give hackers the administrative keys to the network infrastructure for 7 entire California districts?
Including Bakersfield, Chico, San Mateo, and Stockton.
Right.
It comes down to flat network topologies and a failure of segmentation. An RTK-based deployment relies on real-time kinematic positioning to give field crews highly precise GPS data.
Centimeter-level accuracy for mapping pipes or laying infrastructure.
Exactly. The problem arises when the administrative dashboard managing that tool, likely running on a Linux box utilizing webmin on port 10,000, is not isolated from the rest of the corporate network.
The door propped open with a brick.
Yes. The system administrators likely spun up this open-source tool on a server, failed to place it behind a virtual private network, and left default or shared credentials in place.
So when Handala scanned the internet and found that open port, they didn't just compromise a GPS tool.
No. They gained administrative shell access to a server sitting inside Cal Water's internal subnet.
And from there, it's trivial to extract the plaintext credentials stored in the configuration files, pivot across the flat network, and access the databases housing the billing and customer information.
Now, Handala publicly claimed this breach was retaliation for U.S. military actions in Iran, and they explicitly stated in their release that they chose not to disrupt water access.
Right. And while we are just looking at the intelligence reports and not weighing in on the geopolitics here, from a purely strategic standpoint, what does an attacker gain by claiming political motives and boasting about their restraint?
That's a great question.
Because if they had the access, why not deploy a wiper malware like they did against Stryker earlier this year?
Well, because in the realm of state-sponsored cyber operations, the goal is often deterrence and psychological signaling, rather than immediate kinetic destruction.
Okay, explain that.
If a nation-state or a proxy group actively shuts down the water supply to millions of American citizens, that is a catastrophic escalation.
Right. It triggers a threshold that demands a massive, likely kinetic military response. It invites total war.
Yes. But by breaching the system, extracting the data, and publicly demonstrating that they have the keys to the critical infrastructure, while explicitly stating they chose not to turn the lock, they achieve a massive psychological victory.
They prove their capability, map the internal network for future operations, and sow terror among the populace without crossing the red line that forces a physical military retaliation.
It's a digital hostage situation where the attacker sends a photograph of the hostage tied up, just to prove they can.
Wow. But the warning from researchers at Data Minar and CISA is that this restraint is temporary. By extracting those administrative credentials, they are stockpiling the intelligence needed for a destructive attack down the line.
And that ties everything we've discussed today into one cohesive architectural problem. The attackers are patient.
Right, they are compiling intelligence, whether it's 24 billion records in an Elasticsearch database or administrative credentials from a poorly configured water utility server.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
So let's synthesize this. The threat landscape we're navigating isn't a series of isolated incidents.
It's an interconnected ecosystem of compounding failures.
Exactly. The massive credential leaks provide the raw material to automate highly targeted phishing campaigns against stressed travelers. The consumer demand for frictionless connectivity results in earbuds that can literally be overridden out of thin air.
And the administrative convenience of leaving an open-source GPS tool on an open port can hand over the keys to a state's physical infrastructure.
The perimeter is no longer a wall you can point to. It is distributed across every device, every database, and every network configuration you touch.
Which brings us to what you, the listener, can actually do about this. Because you can't configure the network segmentation for your local water utility.
And you definitely can't rewrite the Bluetooth handshake protocol.
No, but you have absolute control over your personal attack surface. By utilizing multi-factor authentication, you render those 24 billion aggregated passwords entirely useless against your accounts.
And by ensuring auto-updates are active, you patch vulnerabilities like the Beats exploit before an attacker can weaponize them.
Plus, by understanding that the browser padlock simply means a connection is encrypted, not that the site is legitimate, you strip away the psychological advantage of travel phishing scams.
It is about reducing the attack surface you actually control, making yourself an unprofitable target.
Exactly.
So as you head out into your week, consider this. If the underlying digital architecture of our physical world, like a city's water supply, is heavily reliant on open-source contractor tools left running on default ports, who is actually responsible for our security?
Does the ultimate responsibility lie with the mayor and the government, or does it rest with a random, unpaid developer updating code on GitHub?
It's a terrifying thought. Maybe the ultimate goal of cybersecurity shouldn't be building an impenetrable wall to keep hackers out, but rather designing systems that can fail gracefully when an attacker inevitably gets inside.
That's a great point to leave on.
Thanks for joining us for this exploration of the sources. Stay safe, stay curious, and we will catch you next time.